Good afternoon, BookTube. It's Sunday afternoon, a sweltering Sunday afternoon here. It's quite warm. I got the fan on, and I'm still just sweating. I've had to sit for about 10 minutes in front of the fan before doing this to sort of get rid of as much liquid running down my face. Um, but I'm here to do a tag, a 20 question random questions tag by Steve Donoghue. It's a nosy tag from the nosy Parker himself. And this goes, I think he decided to do it on the back of the resurrection of another tag he did some time ago called the 28 random questions, which I haven't done yet, which I will get to, but I thought I'd do this one. I've seen several. I've seen Steve do it, seen many of them, many booktubers that I follow do it. Jason at Spy Was in Bookland, and Amy at the Dusty Bookshelf. So I thought I'd dip my toe into it here. So without further ado, which I do, question one: what's the nearest place to you that's so famous everybody knows it, and how near is it? Well, that's a bit of a trick question for me because most people don't know it's here. They'll know the events, they'll know a lot of the things, but when you say Bedford in England, they'll go, "Really?" Well, there's several. There's a ballroom here, or was a ballroom. It's the Corn Exchange, and during the Second World War, the BBC orchestra were housed there, and many of the time, like they would start their broadcast with from a ballroom somewhere in England, and that was here. And Bing Crosby was there, Marlene Dietrich. I'm sure just anybody else you could think of that was on BBC radio during the Second World War was here and broadcasted from there. There was even the World Service, I believe, that had a little place and doing listening and things like that. All sorts throughout Bedford here, but also too the same location in Bedford is the place where Glenn Miller had his last performance was at the Corn Exchange, and he flew out of Twin Woods, an airport just outside, about a mile or so outside of Bedford here, on December 15th, 1944, to go to Paris, and the plane disappeared somewhere across the channel. So yeah, but most people aren't. They know who Glenn Miller is. They know the sort of story, but they don't know where he sort of last came from. Most people, and same as the BBC. Like sort of. I guess maybe it's just people of a certain age or watching films, and they know the thing from a ballroom somewhere in England, but they never really knew where that was. That was here, and that location is less than a mile, about a half a mile away from where I am. The other connection is John Bunyan, the Puritan preacher and the author of many books, but the one that's best known is Pilgrim's Progress. He was born in a little town called Elstow, less than 3 miles from where I sit. About 3 miles, I guess, and he spent 12 years in the Bedford Goal, which is about the same distance as where the Corn Exchange was, but the Corn Exchange never existed then during the 17th century. But he spent 12 years there, and that's where he wrote Pilgrim's Progress, mostly. And another little nice fact, or interesting fact for me, is that my surname is mentioned in it. It's one of the pilgrims, Standfast. Hence, where John Buchan took the name of his book, Mr. Standfast, from. So, so the third famous bit is where I am. Well, maybe. Probably not. But anyway, that's sort of, it's famous but not famous. I suppose you would know, because most people, again, know who John Bunyan is. People know Pilgrim's Progress. If they've ever read it, they still don't really. Most people don't know the connections to around here. So, number two, have you ever had a paper cut so bad that you thought you might die of it? No. They sting like a bugger, but no, I've never. I've had some bad ones, but I never thought I've had other things that are worse. Um, have you ever found anything genuinely valuable in a used book you bought? And it's interesting listening to the ones like Steve Donoghue found a 6-page letter of Washington Irving, and wow, that's quite amazing. It was interesting listening to Jason's uh, things that he found, uh, and it's very similar to me. I think anybody who has handled tens of thousands of books in their lifetime, going through books at sales or purchases, and you find all the random stuff. You find letters, but I've never found anything from somebody who was famous. There's love letters. There's some of them get pretty salacious. And again, it was funny that he was talking about the Polaroids, the nudge nudge wink wink, secret Polaroids. I've seen those as well. I've seen everything, and you get flowers, uh, even used condoms in books. You just don't want to go there. But yeah, it's. But like for me, I think the most valuable thing that I found was just recently, within a couple of years. Other than the letters, the well, yeah, letters from other people. It's interesting to see their lives. You get receipts, all sorts of stuff. Old bookmarks from old bookshops, which I like. And just normal photographs as well of families, pets, and you name it. Um, but recently, I bought a set of books that are a history of sort of the Near East, Egypt, uh, the Euphrates, and the Levant area, and by Maspero with 3 volumes. The person who owned it clearly liked the Egyptology aspect of it, and there's original articles that are clipped from the the Times, the London Times, about Carter and the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, and going through, and some even a little before that, which to me, for me, it's the most valuable. They're not worth anything really, and it's not a complete collection. I have no doubt about it, but those are the things, and I do like the newspaper articles and seeing things like that with people. People do collect, but and money. I've had money, but Steve was discounting money. It was something that was valuable that you could sell, and I can't think of anything that there was like that. I remember getting an old photograph, like a tintype photograph, but that's long gone, and I don't think that was really worth anything to begin with. Um, Number four, have you ever read, met, or married Jacques Barzun? I have read some of his stuff, not that familiar with him, but never met him, and no, never married him. Aside from your pets, what is the specific non-human animal that you see most often? That is kind of weird. Other, like I see birds, but it just, it's like Steve said, be specific. Because like when I was going back and forth to work, I would see birds and stuff like that, but not no specific species. But I do see something that is interesting. At the head of my bed is a window, and I have to get up, age-wise, to make the stroll down the hallway, and yeah, I won't go into details there. Uh, but when I get up and I come back, it's usually around anywhere from like 2 to 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and many times when I come back or I'm getting up, I see this fox trotting down the sidewalk, on the opposite side of the street, just without a care in the world. Big bushy-tailed fox, just strutting along, and I've seen him. I probably see him a couple times a week, basically. See him many, many times. So that's probably the most animal that I see, because I don't have pets anymore here, and I don't see people's dogs by going out or anything like that. So yeah, so bushy-tailed fox. Um, Number six, have you ever been inside a cathedral? If more than one, do you have a favorite? Yes, I've been in quite a while. I think the first cathedral that I'd been into was sometime in the 80s. I went on a school trip to Washington, and I went to the Washington Cathedral there, and it was still, and it probably still is, in construction. As Jason said, it's generational. I think they started it sometime around First World War or after, before. But I remember, and I haven't looked it up. I should have looked it up to be sure of this, but I believe that in the big circular window that they got, the stained glass window at the one end, there is a piece of moon rock that's in the center of it. I believe it is, that was brought back from the moon. So, but my favorite, I think, would be Winchester Cathedral, for a number of reasons. I went there. That was probably no, it wasn't the first cathedral I saw in England here, but it's when I first came to England 20 years ago, basically. And I was in awe of it, and there was a little, the normal tour through their little library, but the guy who was doing the tour realized, I think he was bored of showing people books, nice books and manuscripts uh, that didn't give a shit. Basically, they didn't care. They just sort of were ticking off the box, and I came along and I was interested, and so he gave me, after the official tour, he showed me a whole bunch of other things that was really interesting, and also too got into the cat. I was going to say the catacombs, but no, the crypt. Um, and I think it was the first time in probably maybe a decade that they were open, and I think they were only open that day. The reason is that basically it's built on a swamp, so they've always been flooded, and there's a sort of well down there. There's a sculpture of some sort. I remember, but it was the first time that they allowed people in there because it was flooded. And also Winchester has the place where the uh, the round table is, King Arthur, well, purported to be King Arthur's round table, which is quite interesting. There was a great book by Boydell on, I think Biddle was the name. It's a fabulous book that I had read after I went there. When I went back to Canada, I used to have it. It's just a fabulous book on the Arthur's Round Table. And then the place is just great too. It's a great walk around. There's the little Winchester school. I think there was a house. I think Jane Austen lived there for a while. I remember going by a house that said something about Jane Austen, who lived there. And I might be mixing up with somewhere else's, but I'm sure there's a huge statue of King Alfred, I believe. But I could be mixing up a few things. But Winchester Cathedral was fantastic. There was a little local museum there. It was just a whole fantastic couple days that I spent there, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was in December, I think it was, beginning of December, and it was just fabulous to walk around because they had all these walks that you could go on, and I went on every one, and they were just fabulous. It's just walking along, and it reminded me of scenes from films that I'd seen. There's a scene with a John Mills film. It's an H.G. Wells story. Not History of Mr. Polly. But anyway, there's a scene where he's at a wall and there's a girls' school in behind, anyway, and it just where I was walking, like, it might have actually been filmed there, because I swear it just reminded me just perfectly of that scene. But anyway, I'm deterring. But yeah, Winchester Cathedral. Um, Number 7. Have you ever been actually seeing and hearing things delirious? Yeah, a few times. I suppose the worst and the first time was when it was 1991 when I went to Jordan. I went to do archaeology in Jordan, and for some reason, like everybody pretty well that came on the same flight, we all got these sort of nasty cold. But mine went into my chest, and I had a temperature that was so high that by the time I got to the hospital, they were freaking out when they took my temperature. But yeah, I was seeing things. I was spouting about. Speaking to dead archaeologists. um, it was very very weird, and yeah, I can't remember what my temperature was, but it was the nurse took it. There was a university nearby of where, and it was a university hospital in Amman, Jordan, and the nurse took it and just she freaked. That took a while to get down, but I don't know how long I was in that way. I think I sort of passed out at some point, and so passed out in the sense of just fell asleep. But ever since then, when I do get a really high temperature, I sometimes do. I'll do things that I don't remember. I'll call people up and have conversations with them, and these are real people, I think. They tell me about it later that I had these huge conversations with them, and I don't remember. So I don't know if that's delirious or not. The last time it was drug induced. Uh, no, not what you're thinking. When I was in the hospital several years ago, it'll be 3 years ago this September, September and October for cellulitis in my leg, and I'm still sort of plagued with it. Just in the weather here is not good. But anyway, I'm allergic to penicillin, a antibiotic, so they couldn't give that to me, and that's sort of the number one drug there. So they had to find a combination, a cocktail of other antibiotics that would work. So they were trying things, and they gave me one that just set me delirious and hallucinations. And I sat there and had a conversation with Dracula. Yeah, I had a conversation. I interviewed Dracula. Yeah, as I said, it was drug induced, so I have a reason for that. But yeah, and until they got it off me while my arms were swelling up, and it was nasty. They were nasty. Um, Number 8. Do you have blood relatives who read for pleasure? One of my brothers reads for pleasure. Uh, Other more distant ones, I'm not in contact with them really. My niece and nephews, they used to read when they were young, but it's decades, a couple decades since I've actually been in contact with them. My mom used to read, but in later life, but she'd read sort of the kind of the Mills and Boone stuff that Jason was talking about. His mother would read sort of a romance type thing, not Harlequins, I don't think, but other things. My dad was fond of books, and he did read occasionally, not studiously, but he did enjoy, I think, reading occasionally. Um, my other brothers, not so much at all. And let's see, number 9. How many? Blimey, I'm at 20 minutes now. I'm not even halfway there. How many species have you smooched smack dab on the lips? Well, Steve says you can do humans, so humans, dogs, cats. We had goats. So as a child, I kissed goats. So that's 4 for sure. But I also remember as a child having neighbors at some point or going horse riding. So I'm sure I probably kissed a horse as well. So 4 for sure, 5 probably. Um, Number 10. Do you ever listen to the radio? Any favorite program or person? I don't listen as much anymore. I use sort of the catch up, BBC. It's BBC Radio 4 mostly. Um, and it's the drama programs, comedy programs, something that I've listened to for decades. Are things like Just a Minute on Radio 4. Um, I'm I'm sorry I haven't a clue. Um, and those are things that I listened to when I was in Canada as well. I remember as a child for a long time, my dad used to tune into the BBC World Service, and we used to listen to Alistair Cook's Letter from America. And there was another broadcaster that I have fond memories of, and I think I've got a bunch of MP3 files of his broadcasts. His name was Paul Harvey, and they're usually anywhere from a couple minutes to about 5 minutes long, and he would give this little rambling story of something, and then he would give the punchline of who it was, and it was now you know the rest of the story. This is Paul Harvey. Good day. And it's sort of that kind of cadence that he would say, and I really enjoyed those things because they like it was usually something about somebody was in an accident, or that as a child that this things happen, and it happens to be Theodore Roosevelt or something like that. They just some little incident in that person's life. But yeah, and I used to listen as a kid. I remember listening to radio. We lived grew up on an island, so and it was close to the American border. So a lot of the one TV station we'd get with a little antenna or a couple of TV stations would be American, but also American radio as well. And I remember listening late at night to old time radio stuff. There was a program. And I remember listening on crystal radio sets this late at night, being way out in the rural area in northern Ontario. Um, yeah. So and I've always continuously loved old time radio drama. Um, and still like it now. And I listen to the BBC. Music, well, I was a teenager, yeah, I listened to rock music. Now, if I turn on music, I never turn on sort of rock music or popular music. It's usually classical. There was, during the 80s and 90s, there was a Toronto station. It was a public sort of, they'd ask for donations to keep it going. And guy's name. But he would have I think it was Friday or Saturday night. It was the big band show, and they played big band music for an hour or two. And he was Glenn Woodcock. That's who it was. Glenn Woodcock. CJRT could have been the radio one. I don't know. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. I should have looked it up. But no, he was very knowledgeable. He'd play 78s. He would tell stories of his collection, but he knew the discography, and he knew the history of the players, and it was just great. And there was other ones throughout time, other ones. There were some American ones that I listened to as well. Some college radio stuff later when I got internet that played similar kinds of things, 20s, 30s kind of music. And now there's internet radio, like crazy. There's for old time radio stuff. I remember it's one of the first internet ones was Brando Old Time Radio that I used to listen to, and there's a bunch of others that have started. And there's like on what's it called? I've got a I don't see it. An app I used to have for a radio station that would, but I could find 20s 30s kind of music, and I do listen to that occasionally now because there's no advertisements with it. It's just the other crap is not interesting. But anyway, that's too long, and I am I'm at 25 minutes. That was 10, so I'm halfway there. Have you ever been to the Eiffel Tower, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or the Louvre? No, I've not. The only time I've been to Europe, Europe proper, the mainland, was being in either on an airplane going somewhere else, like the Middle East, or I spent several weeks in Latvia. But I've not been to France or Italy. Number 12, that little thing. What little thing do you miss most that you've lost due to the pandemic? I suppose there's a couple things. They're not that. It's sort of seeing different scenery here because I've only been out, twice since I've sort of self isolated at the beginning of March. So seeing a different scenery because I have really no backyard in my place. There's nowhere to go out to sit, and my mobility is sort of shot. I can't get out and walk very far. It means getting a taxi somewhere, and I want to limit that. And I've only been out once to a bookshop. I did the book haul here about a month ago. So it's a different scenery, but also too in this heat at work, we had air conditioning. I use it in quotation marks because it wasn't never very cool. Because everybody thinks that if it goes to sort of below 25, they're freezing to death. Most people, but at least it was a bit cooler. And then with a fan, it became semi comfortable. And that's what that I sort of miss that being semi comfortable for that. Yeah, so those two things. Uh, and what little thing do you miss least that you've lost due to that? Well, I miss going to the like the least. I like working from home, and that's the double edged sword of feeling a little more comfortable temperature wise at work, but so much perfume around, constant headaches every day, and that's at and either eye irritation or rashes. Those was a daily occurrence, and then the bad occurrences were so bad that if somebody sprays something and I wind up in an ambulance to the hospital. So I don't miss that at all. Um, Number 14. I think I'm doing these right. Yeah. 14. What is your relationship with small talk? Hate it like acid, love it, merely competent. It depends on what the topics are and we want to, you know, chit chat about. I'm not the greatest about weather, so yeah, it's hot. Yeah, it's bloody hot. Yeah, I don't like the humidity. The heat, dry heat's okay. Yeah, yeah, but it's the humidity that really, yeah. Do that. Like heat, yeah, temperature is usually the thing, and English people just love talking about the weather. But the other thing is, like, there's things that people chit chat about that I can't. Sports, I couldn't chit chat about sports if my life depended on it. The other things that I usually do, I usually say, and people just sort of look at each other blank and just go woo over their head. It's usually a literary thing or some musical reference, historical reference, book reference, film reference that just is lost to them. So I suppose that it depends on the situation, but not that great at it. Have you ever won money at gambling? Yeah. I used to play occasionally poker. Not for big amounts of money, but it was just fun to get together with people. And yeah, I'd won. I think I always won something. I probably lost a few times, but I probably hardly lost anything. I'm not a big gambler. I've never played the lotto. The only thing I would gamble on is sort of like I gambled on buying a book, thinking, well, yeah, that I can maybe flip that and make some money, and that's the only gambling that I've done. I remember being first in a casino was in Canada, and this is going back over 20, maybe 25, almost 30 years ago now, I guess. Casinos weren't that popular in Canada because they started out with in most of the provinces, they weren't legal, I don't think, for a long time. And then the Native North Americans started having casinos and people going to them. But one time I went with a friend, like we went to Montreal where I was living in Kitchener Waterloo, and we went to Montreal to see a a film, a TV personality that was on Babylon 5, and I wanted to get some pictures signed. So we went there, but then we also went to. There was a friend of his sister's, I think, that took us to a casino. And at that point, I didn't have any money to do that because of the money I had. I wanted to buy some pictures and get these photographs, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I went there, and it sort of told me everything I needed to know about sort of casinos to never go back. There were two people sitting there with like um, the one armed bandit or whatever it's called. There's different names for them. But anyway, instead of putting coins in, they were putting in. There one person was putting in $100 bill, and the other person was putting in $50 bills. So they sit there and not move, like literally just with the thing going dink, dink, dink. Instead of the pulling the arm, it was a button. So they just there dink, 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 dink until the 50 or 100's gone. Put in another one, dink, dink, dink. And I watched these people for about an hour and not do anything. And I'm going, oh God, no, I'd never do that. So yeah, so yes, but not often and not for a long time. Do you ever give money or time to charities? I volunteered. I used to volunteer quite a bit when I was in England here. Uh, I've never really given too much money to charities. It's mostly time. I should rectify that because I can't afford a little bit, and especially now, I think they need it. So could be. Number 17. Do you craft, knitting, crocheting, woodworking, pottery, throwing? I actually was knitting for a little while. I learned to knit because, well, there's a whole story behind that, but I won't bore you with that now. But yeah, I never really became proficient in it. The only thing that I do want to do, and I think Jason mentioned this too, is I do want to do some bookbinding. Not so much with leather. That's, I think, going to be beyond me tooling leather. But I'd like to learn how to do competent sort of cloth covered, rebind or rebacking of a book. That's just totally falling apart, just to sort of preserve it. And that I'd like to do. Number 18. Do you talk to yourself when you're alone? Yeah, I do at times. I don't know why. It's always been. It's like, oh, well, I wonder where this going. Oh, that's where it is. Sort of, it's sort of sometimes vocalizing louder and then sort of under the breath a little bit. And I get a lot of swearing out with the computer when I'm alone, when it's not doing anything. So, yeah. So, definitely I do. And 90% of it would be swearing at the computer when it doesn't do what it should be doing or take it too long to do what it should be doing. Number 19. Are you a social queen bee in college? No, definitely not. I went to some parties. Um, but I didn't care for parties because I've always been a big guy. And so people want to, there's too many idiots out there that want to pick on, thinking that I couldn't do anything until they found out that I could. So it usually wound up in a fight, any party that I went to. So I wasn't really a social thing. Other than, yeah, I was with the, like I went through for archaeology, so there was an archaeology society, and I was on there, the board, and sort of help run it. So we did do some things. Like I edited a newsletter, which I'm quite proud of because up to the time I took it, it was just sort of, handwritten, photocopied, two pieces of paper stapled together. And I made a proper folding item stapled down the center with pictures and, typesetting and everything. It was sort of, it's so easy to do it now. And what I was doing was I was using it on a computer, but I had to put a command in if I want an indent for the beginning of the paragraph. I'd have to put a command in to do that, and then take the command out for the next line. Have the columns. and if I want to put an inset picture, I'd have to have a command for every line. But it was fun, and the thing is that for years after, the same format for whatever program was being used was carried on. So I'm quite proud of the legacy that I did for that. But also too, we were a very rich club on campus because we ran some bingos. Like there was always a bingo hall, and we would rent it out and sort of and most times we would come out there with $6,000 to $8,000, profit after paying out for everything. Occasionally, if somebody hit the big jackpot, we wouldn't. We would sometimes just break even, but most of the time, that didn't happen. So we had a lot of money, and then all of a sudden, we were they were having parties and stuff. So they have cake parties, and I think the thing came up was that we shouldn't have this much money, so we started having cake parties more, spending more money on that, and then you can't do that. You can't have the parties, can't spend the money on that. So then we just decided to give everybody bursaries for going to field schools and stuff. Oh yeah, you're going there? Are you going somewhere nearby? Oh, here's $1,000 or $2,000 bursary. And just gave everybody bursaries, and I got it. Going several times too. So that was good. But social wise, no, I'm not a great social type person. Now, coming up to the last question here. Are you a sunrise person or a sunset person? Neither really. Like the sunsets don't really, like they're nice to watch, but generally sunrise is too early for me. If I picked any of them, it would be sunset, and sitting back, watching the sunset. I think would be more of my liking. And now, and like Steve says, tags everybody. I'm not tag. I don't have anybody specific to tag because I think everybody's going to do it. So if you want to do it, please do. And if you've gotten this far, you're not a social person either. Go get a life. Anyway, I'll be back at some point with the 28 nosy tag that Steve did. I don't know how I'm going to do that. That's going to be an hour long. But anyway, take care, BookTube.